All right. Hello. Welcome to the Art of Renovation Live. I'm your host, Paul Foster from Contact Renovations and Custom Homes. This month, we're talking about building your backyard oasis. And this week specifically, we're talking about decks and pergolas and all those great things that make your yard a wonderful, useful space. And then next episode, we'll get into talking about the landscaping, the hardscaping, all that stuff. So this week, my guest is Jon Yuzwenko. He's the owner of Sustain, the deck company. Great company. I know Jon well. He's a great guy. Like us, they strive for a best practice approach to how they do their projects and their work. So great guy to have on the show. So I can see he's just following along here. So I'll introduce him and I'll bring him on, and then we'll get into talking about everything from design options, things to consider as far as planning and preparing to add a deck or pergola or a pavilion or whatever you might be looking to do to make your backyard your own personal oasis. So anyway, so Jon Yuzwenko, he is the owner of Sustain, the deck company. They've been in business for 8 years. Since in this year, in 2021, they won Top Choice Award for Best Deck Builder in Edmonton. They can complete any size of basically project, whether it's a deck or whatever it might be. They do some multifamily stuff as well. They work with wood, composite, vinyl decking, but where they really shine is that large-scale backyard renovation and outdoor living spaces. They do a number of screen rooms, pergolas, pavilions, privacy walls, etc., which we'll talk about during the show today. And Sustain, the way they approach it in their service, they include everything from the design and permitting side of it all the way through managing the construction process. And because within that, there sometimes is sub-trades, and they're good at managing those too. Anyway, so I'll bring Jon on here. Give me a second. This has been changed. Bear with me. I didn't update this phone, so it's a bit of a different configuration here. Bear with me for a sec. Sustain. There we go. So yeah, so we've been all stuck indoors for about a year. Well, maybe not a year, but it felt like a year. Hey, Jon.
Hey, buddy.
Whoa, adjust my camera here. All right, welcome back on the show. So I was just saying, we've been stuck indoors for, I said a year. The winter felt kind of like a year, but it's time to get outside now and enjoy our yards again. And I think it's a great conversation to start with is, well, how to plan for creating a great useful space in your backyard. We're not talking landscaping here. We're talking about decks, pergolas, pavilions, all that good stuff that you can really create a wonderful, useful space in the yard. So where to even start? There's so much to consider. An hour will not be enough for us to get through this today, I'm sure, but we will do our best. I'm going to pin the topic here, but I would say if you wanted to just kind of start off telling us a bit about, Sustain, what's the best way to find you, what are your favorite types of projects, and then we'll get into kind of the outline we had discussed beforehand.
Perfect. Cool. Thanks for the introduction, Paul. Like you mentioned, we've been in business 8 years now. Got into business by accident. I had no intentions of starting the construction company. I was actually flipping a couple houses with my wife, and we were going through the renovation process, trying to find contractors, and realized that there was a lot of things I didn't like about the experience, a lot of things that I thought could do better, and kind of just morphed into that and really narrowed down and niched into exteriors. Discovered quite quickly that we are horrible at renovations in general, which we leave that stuff to you. It's not a ballpark that we like to play in, but the backyard always made a lot of sense, and I think we've done pretty good at it. Where to start? The best thing that
let's talk a bit about, we worked with you a few times here.
Yeah.
And I know you well personally. I know what kind of guy you are. But I think,
yeah,
for us, for example, for me, my favorite projects, regardless of scope or scale, is something that is collaborative. I love working with the client when they're highly engaged and excited, and that, to me, becomes far more fulfilling as we get through the process and they understand we're looking out for them and all that stuff, right? And I've seen you and the way you work, and it's very similar in that sense. And I like to talk about it a bit because you know what, everyone's looking for a good contractor. We're looking for good clients. And I think that your perspective on how you approach a job has a big impact upon how you execute as well.
Yeah, and thanks for the reminder. Yeah, we collaboratively is a great word. We really shine when we have a client who's engaged in the outcome of the project and wants their input felt, not just somebody who's looking to hire a contractor to get something completed. We service that and we do a great job, but we don't get to showcase our skills as much unless the client, you know, really has a vision or wants to be along for the process. We love working with people. Our avatar, our ideal client is somebody in a mature neighborhood, typically in Southwest Edmonton, South Central, Sherwood Park or St. Albert, with a larger backyard. Somebody who's been in their home for a while or wants to be there. They've got some space to actually get creative and make something happen. Doesn't have to be over the top, you know, 6-figure showpiece that, you know, you're only going to do once in a year, but we like something unique, something that has character, something that they've put a lot of thought into. And they don't necessarily have to have all the answers. We find sometimes people think they have to have it all figured out before they even contact us. We are more than happy to help with the design, give recommendations on products, availability, outcome, the orientation of your house, the height of the deck, what you're going to use it for, along with your budget, color choices, etc. all kind of go into one. So it's hard just to give, you know, a lot of people say, well, how much does it cost? And it's like, well, it's like saying, how much does a car cost? It's such a loaded question that we can really tailor to however they want. And yeah, collaboratively, it's got stuck in my head. That's kind of how we do best.
For sure. And I think that, you know, I think for most contractors, I shouldn't say that actually, because I know there's some people out there that work really well when they're just provided with the plan and it's like, leave us alone, let us execute based on said plan. And for me, like, we can do that, sure, but I think the rubber really hits the road when you have a plan, but you're constantly looking for ways that it can possibly be improved. And I mean, that's a slippery slope because you don't want to be constantly changing along the way. But hey, I think that our job is to make sure along the way, if something comes up, we find the best way to address it, right? And that takes being engaged. And I think that for any good client, you know, they're aware of, hey, there's work happening here, and they should be receptive and hopefully open to getting advice and recommendations from their contractors. And, you know, I mean, obviously, I'm assuming here that everyone's doing this on the up and up. We're not trying to get change orders. Yeah. We're trying to really provide the best possible end result. And sometimes that involves modifying plan along the way. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the best laid plan actually works. But I've always found for me that the engaged client are the most fun to work with and generally appreciate the level of service that contractors like you and I bring. They really appreciate that, and they really appreciate the end result, knowing what it took to get there. But
100%. And I'm smiling as you're talking because, like, a lot of times we'll get feedback from people that we don't get the job from, and it's typically, you know, oh, you were too expensive. It's not that we're too expensive. It's that we have done this so much. We know what kind of hurdles to anticipate, and we tell them up front what to expect for a cost. I could very easily, just like you could very easily, come in bare bones at the bottom and then get there and start being like, oh, well, we didn't know that you wanted walls in your house. Nobody told us you wanted walls in your house, you know? And it's like, we tell you about all these things ahead of time. On the onset, yes, we look more expensive, but it's a much more seamless journey. We have a pretty good track record of not a ton of surprises. Surprises happen. It's construction. There's things that we miss or things that come up that we didn't anticipate. But that's how we like to kind of prep the client, is for not just what's going to happen, but what could happen, so that when it does, they've already been prepared. Because I find no matter what the size is, whether it's a $5,000 or a $50,000 job, one of people's biggest complaints is getting blindsided by something that they didn't expect. And we're not fortune tellers, but we've got a pretty good idea what's going on, and we try to prep them ahead of time so that at least it's like, okay, you know, you mentioned that this might happen. It's happened. I appreciate that. Let's work through it together.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know something, I had a conversation with another contractor yesterday, and, you know, we're talking a bit about bidding on projects and the process there. And You know, I'm not going to mention any names, but they're aware of the fact that a lot of people will go out there and bid knowing there's things missing from their bid, knowing that to make the bottom line look better so they can get in the door, get a contract, and then make up for it later, right?
Yeah.
And this other contractor said, you know what, they have to play the game somewhat to be able to land jobs. And I don't play the game like that, like you don't. And
No.
I lose a lot of work to people who come in and on a $100,000 project, they're $15,000 less than me. And the client has a hard time saying no to the $15,000 savings, only to find out later that by the end of the job, it was $15,000 more than they were quoted, or more sometimes. And it was really frustrating. I know I hear what you're saying, because you want to come forward on the up and up and show them exactly what you believe it should cost. You've been through it before, your experience, so you know what to expect. There's some contingency included, so you don't have to go nickel and dime the client to death every time there's a little hiccup along the way. And that's reflected, though, in the upfront price. And I explain this to our clients or potential clients, and most of them go, wow, that's great, I really appreciate that, what a better way to do it. But in the end, they can't say no to the 15 grand, and they go to someone else. Right? So I feel your pain, and I can relate to it. Speaking of feeling some pain, I am very disappointed to say that Instagram has again dropped the show pictures feature from Instagram Live. So I spent a whole bunch of time with you yesterday curating a selection of images to support our conversation today. And now there is no show image icon on the phone again. So for the viewers, you get to look at these two handsome devils for an hour.
Perfect.
I had all these beautiful pictures to show. I'm very disappointed about this. You might see my show go to a new platform soon. This is the second time this has happened, and it's very frustrating. But anyhow, if you're just tuning in, this is the Art of Renovation Live. I'm your host, Paul Foster from Contact Renovations, and I have Jon Yuzwenko from Sustain the Deck Company on the show today. And we're going to go through and talk about all the things you need to consider and know about when you're looking at creating your backyard oasis, which means decks, pergolas, privacy screens, pavilions, etc. So let's get into that. And my first question for you, Jon, is what the heck is a pavilion?
Yeah, pavilion, it's just it's a fancy way of saying a pergola with a roof. It's basically an outdoor living space. Usually it's atop a patio. The ones that come to mind when people visualize it most is like a big timber frame or exposed rafters. I've got one in my backyard. I don't have a deck. I've got a walkout living room right to a ground level patio. So I couldn't get a deck, so we built a nice covered pavilion. But they're a great space. They're a great alternative space that a lot of people don't consider. They offer a lot of different advantages. One, you can screen them in or have permanent or privacy walls on the side. Two, you can get down. So sometimes in certain neighborhoods, if you've got a lot of high profile or visual neighbors, it's a nice way to get your space down low to the ground off your deck, so that you've got a bit more privacy. Three, you can make them more year round. We've installed patio heaters in them, or you can just go get one of those propane ones or whatever, so you can add a little heat to your space so you can use it. Yeah, they're nice little. They're not very common here, but we do a number of them, and they're gaining traction slowly. I'm talking about them more and more, and we're actually quoting another one right now, and they're starting to come around, which is good to see. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's very practical, right? And I've always referred to a pergola as either like an actual covered pergola, which I guess is a pavilion. Yeah. But anyhow, so I guess let's start with the beginning. Let's start with the design, right? And again, I had some nice designs to show. Some were yours, some were mine, whatever. But now we'll just talk about them. So sure. Starting with the design, and I say this on the show constantly, it's like your project is only as good as your design and your plan before you even start construction. If you don't have a good design in place, you're hooped. Because a good design will show not just the design of your structure, it'll also factor in various considerations, like in regards to a deck or pergola, you might need some piles. Where are they going to go? Are they going to conflict with anything that's in ground now? Electrical, water, irrigation, perhaps.
Are you going to want power or gas in that deck or pergola later? Have you factored it in? So the design is more about, ooh, what's the pretty thing we're going to build? It's about what features you need in that pretty thing and how you're going to make it practical to use it so that when you finish building your beautiful deck or pergola and you go, man, I wish I could run a heater here. You don't go, oh, I have to take apart my floor structure to be able to run the gas line through it. I need to do some more, open up the landscaping we just finished to be able to trench for the gas line. Those are the things that are important within the design, is all the ugly stuff that's behind the scenes. Those are key, because like in a kitchen, if you rough power into the wrong place for your induction oven, you get a problem. You're looking at you're modifying your kitchen layout. So same thing applies to your deck or your pergola. You need to make sure your design is accurate for as far as, you know, it's spot on with what you want it to look like and the materials and all that stuff. But what else do you need to consider, I guess, on the design side?
The thing that we, after so many projects, what we tell clients to start with is either their vision, what they want the space to be used for, what they envision of it, colors, layouts, get as detailed as you can, or two, a specific budget. And in either one of those are good starting points to work backwards from. Too many people are focused on just the cost, and I understand why. But if you build a deck that doesn't work for you and it's completely functional, and your budget was 10 grand, but 15 would have given you everything you wanted, you didn't save $5,000. You actually wasted 10 grand.
Right.
Because you can't use it. It doesn't work for you. You're probably disappointed and a little bit upset that you even did it. So design is really, really important. Where you put your staircase, how big you make your staircase. Like stairs are very good. They're a great transitional space from one area to another, but they can also decrease your usable area because you're not probably going to put a couch or a table right beside a staircase. When it comes to bigger jobs and bigger staircases, they're also an extremely expensive component of it. So, you know, everybody wants these grand staircases with all these lights and features, but they can be quite costly and very labor intensive. So starting with the design, and you don't have to have everything figured out, just an idea. We've got 3 kids, you know, we're eventually going to be able to socialize. We're going to have friends over. You know, this is what we want. We always do, you know, Sunday dinners, and we want this and this, or it's just me and my husband, or it's just me and my wife. And, you know, like those kind of details are so crucial. And then we can work backwards with your backyard and kind of give you some ideas on what's going to work best.
For sure. I think, you know, thinking about how you're going to use the space, who's going to use the space. And, you know, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Like if you have a budget of 10, but you can't get what you want for 10, so you scale back, I think that's a mistake. I would rather see you wait a year or 2 years, whatever you need to catch up, so you can have the right budget to build the space you truly want to use. Because I've seen way too many houses with big decks or big balconies that never get used. Like, and these are in some like nice houses, and you just see they spend all this money on their big balcony and big fancy railings to say that they basically use it once or twice a year. That to me shows there was a poorly designed space. Either its exposure was bad, it's northeast facing, so you don't ever get any sunlight, it's not accessible, whatever it might be, right? Maybe it's not sheltered enough, so you get bombarded by wind or rain too often. Anyway, so those are all part of a good design. And I guess one more note I want to make about the design stage is, in my mind, you should have one call out there or a secondary locate pretty early on in the design process to make sure that if you have a very specific point where you need point load, where you need a pile, if you find out later that pile can't go there because your sewer line runs right there, it might have an impact on how you have to build the deck. So I like to know that kind of stuff early, just to make sure I don't design it and go, oh my goodness, I got 4 piles running down the sewer line. Well, that's a deal breaker. Now what? I have to go 1 meter over either way. That has a major impact upon how that deck is built potentially, right? So anyhow,
Yeah,
That's all
yeah.
part of the planning stage.
I'm laughing because it doesn't happen actually very often, but when it does happen, it seems to be like a showstopper. And we're doing a project actually right now. I sent you a photo which we can't see, and we've ripped out an existing deck around a raised ground level pool, and we're installing a new one. And the client's backyard, they've got a lot of different things. They've got, you know, gas to a greenhouse, and they've got private electrical, and then they've got the heater, and then they've got another gas line to the house, and they've got irrigation lines, and it's an absolute minefield. So that's exactly what we did. We ripped it out. We've got first call and second call private locators coming out, creating a map of everything. And then we have to plan our pile location around that. So it's you know, it can be very challenging for the pile installers, but
Absolutely. And I'm going
make it
to,
work.
if you're a homeowner and you're planning to do any of this kind of work yourself, or if you're hiring a contractor, look, if there is no reference to a secondary line locator in your project, you are rolling the dice. I learned that early on as a contractor, that Alberta one call is not good enough, because you don't know any secondary utilities. So that means if you've got a gas line from your house to your garage, or power, or if you have irrigation, maybe you ran water out to the garage, Alberta one call will not mark any of that stuff. They're only going to mark primary services to the home. So we found this out by putting a new set of stairs in on a balcony one day, and where we had two piles, one at the bottom of each stringer, and on one pile we hit a gas line and an electrical line. We hit the gas line first,
Yeah.
fixed it, went down another foot and hit an electrical line. And that was when we learned that, oh, one call doesn't do it all. Okay, well, I wish they'd explained that. And this was in my younger years of contracting, right? So
Yeah.
anyway, so now our policy is, look, secondary locate is either in every scope document. It's either says includes or does not include but is required. And that gives the opportunity for the homeowner to hire them themselves if they want to save a couple bucks on the fee, right? So anyhow, enough of that. So we're talking about piles. We have some options for piles. So if you're just tuning in, this is the Art of Renovation Live. I'm your host, Paul Foster, and I got Jon Yuzwenko from Sustain, the deck company, here today. We're talking about building your backyard oasis, specifically decks and pergolas, and now we're talking about piles. So we have some options for piles. You have concrete piles. You can go with helical piles. You could use deck blocks. You could do some grade beam work. So I guess that's more foundation stuff, but what's your go-to for piles, and why?
We 99% of our jobs are screw piles, helical screw piles. We haven't done a concrete pile in 5 years. Or we'll do a lot of above grade floating piles as well. So we start with screw piles on every job. There are times when we either can't access the site, which if the deck is low enough to the ground, we'll proceed with a floating deck. If it's a high enough deck, then we cannot. We need to get into the backyard no matter what before we'll do something. We use screw piles for a couple of reasons. One, we can get in and out in a heartbeat. So we can start construction the same time as the piles go in. There's no delays. They're much cheaper and cleaner than concrete piles, and they're a better choice. So with piles, you've got a couple things to consider. You've got compression forces, which is the weight pushing down atop of it. And then you've got heaving or uplift forces. When I began doing this, frost heave was like this mythical unicorn that you'd heard about, but nobody ever saw. And it was like this fear mongering, oh, it's going to heave, it's going to heave. Mm-hmm. And it never did. I've never seen a heave deck until 3 years ago. And then since 3 years ago, I have seen more and more heave decks every year, because the weather has been getting more and more unpredictable, where you've got massive cold spells and then warm spells and then cold spells, and it just drives the frost deep. And I've been on a number of quotes from insurance companies, from our pile contractors, from other contractors, only to break the hearts of homeowners and be like, you need to call an insurance company, because not only is the 2-story or 3-story deck at your your lakeside walkout damaged, but you've also got water sloping backwards from your vinyl deck into your house down the exterior wall of your house. Like it's not a pretty picture. So we typically fix 1 or 2 of them a year. And yeah, we use screw piles for everything.
Yeah, and I would say the screw pile is typically more stable in that sense as far as, you know, addressing heave. And I mean, the key with the screw pile is torque and how much force you have, and it'll depend on the kind of soil you have. So sometimes you need to add extensions, not necessarily about the length or the length of the pile. It's about what kind of ground it's being ultimately driven into, right?
Yeah, you got it.
So I guess let's talk about the deck block or the little floating footing there. So when do you use that and when do you not use it?
So we get a lot of requests for a ground level deck. You know, a client maybe doesn't want a patio. They want just something just above the ground, but close to it as possible. We'll use, depending on the situation, if it's a pretty level ground and it's an older, mature neighborhood where I know the settling has pretty much dissipated out of the soil, we will use it. But it's a freestanding deck. We will not put it onto the next to that, like we won't attach it to the house. And we'll also still dig out each footing and put wash rock or drainage rock underneath each pile so that at least it mitigates the possibilities of it moving. And we've been doing that for years and haven't had any issues.
Yeah. The key is if it's floating, then you do not attach it to the structure, to the home.
That's
right.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
And
yeah.
I've seen it too often where you've got this, it's, you know, a floating deck attached to the rim board of the ledger on the home, and it's pulling away, and man, it creates so many challenges, and it's a mistake that's common. Unfortunately, you see it by lots of DIYers out there that don't know. They think that by attaching to the house it will stabilize it, and one way it will, but you can also cause some serious damage if your deck starts moving and it's pulling on your house.
Totally.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about some other funner stuff. And again, I wish I could show you some pictures. I'm sorry, everyone. Blame Instagram. There it is. There's my complaint of the day. Instagram pulled pictures from my show. Anyways, there's me. Poor me. We're talking about decking product options now. That's a big conversation to have because A, there's many options. B, they are not all equal. And C, they certainly are not priced equally either. And some are very hard to get your hands on now. So if you're just tuning in, this is the Art of Renovation Live. I'm your host, Paul Foster from Contact Renovations. I have Jon Yuzwenko from Sustain, the deck company. And our show today is about creating your backyard oasis. Right now, we're talking about your decking product options. So you hear a lot about the options for composite decking. Now there's PVC, and then you can get into things like Caillou, right? Cedar, pressure treated. Let's go through those, Jon, and let's talk about what you're putting in most often, and then we'll follow that up with what is, in your opinion, the downside to these products, if there is one.
Totally. So we've seen a massive transformation. Eight years ago when we started, almost every deck was pressure treated or cedar. 1 out of every 10 or 2 out of every 10 was maintenance free composite. That number has flipped over the last 8 years, more and more percentage every year to maintenance free options, which kind of breaks my heart because I've got a soft spot for cedar and I love cedar. I've got a cedar pavilion. I've built cedar pergolas for myself. I've got a cedar fence at my house. I'm very biased towards it. I love it. It's a great wood, but it doesn't necessarily need maintenance, but there can be some maintenance involved, and a lot of times people just don't want to touch it. It's unfortunate, I think, but most of the time we're installing maintenance free, either like a typical deck board, a capped composite or a PVC board, or vinyl decking. We do a lot of vinyl decking. We do a lot of second story lake projects or second story walkout decks. And it is a really good product for those situations because you get a maintenance free choice, but you also get a waterproof space underneath in the same product. Hardwoods or Indonesian foreign products. We don't do a ton of Caillou. It's a beautiful product. We do have a nice, really big one coming up this year. It's a great product. Again, can require some maintenance, but is absolutely beautiful. It's a very modern, clean look. It's got an eased edge, which just basically means it's got a very kind of like almost 90-degree edge, but just a slight bevel on it. It's a very, very crisp, clean, modern looking board. Price point wise, it's basically the cost of maintenance free. So a lot of times people, that's their flipping point where they're like, well, if I'm already paying the same price as a maintenance free, I might as well get a maintenance free board. So those are kind of the big ones.
Yeah, for sure. I think the Kayuu is beautiful as the cedar.
Oh yeah.
You know, I mean, I have a composite deck or decking on my balcony. I personally hate it. And the only reason I say that the product that I have is probably 10 years old or maybe less than that. It must be, I don't know, it's on the older side. It's incredibly slippery, and I have seriously fallen down my stairs of my balcony. I came out with garbage in both hands in the winter, and I'd iced up, and I fell like I haven't fallen in years, and I had a huge hipper, and ever since then, you know, a little bit of water on that balcony, it is so slippery, and it's just the product, right? I mean, now they've designed the products now to have far more grip, you know, incorporated into the actual construction of it. I've got, you know, basically grip tape all over my stairs and help prevent me and my dogs from falling down the stairs. So but anyhow, so one thing about, I guess, the composite too and versus PVC is, you know, some of those products are hollow and you need end caps on them, or you need to have a special edging board that goes around it. You know, some products don't have a matching core color, so you have to again factor that into how you do your design and how you finish it. Let's talk a bit about that.
Yeah, it's a way that can be very misleading for homeowners when they see quotes, because they might see 3 or 4 quotes from contractors and they don't have a specified product. So you get 3 or 4 people who look at it completely, you know, subjectively through their own lens. And a lot of those little finishing touches can add a lot to the cost. But if I showed a customer 3 or 4 different finished products, regardless of cost, nine times out of 10, they would never pick the 2 or 3 options that the people are quoting. They'd be like, why would I want that? It's like, I call it hubcaps on a Ferrari. Right. You're spending all this money, you're getting this beautiful product, you know, it's going to be, you've thought about it, saved up for it, and then you cheap out at the last second. And a lot of times it's not even cheaping out, it's that they don't know enough. And I don't fault some homeowners because it's not really their job to know. That's why I say, figure out a product, quote the same product to everybody, ask some questions, do a little bit of research, visit a supplier, visit a specialty supplier, not like a Home Depot. Those are building supply stores. They sell the product, but they don't know about the product. Right. So you want to go to more of a specialized store, talk about it, look at it. It's just, it comes down to the due diligence of the contractor or the client. Absolutely. We do a lot of upfront, you know, prepping and coaching. We send clients photos. Hey, this is what we're quoting. Is this the style? Is this the design? Is this what you envision? Right. And we catch a lot of things up front where it's like, whoa, no, that's not what I wanted at all. And then you can adjust course pretty quickly.
For sure. And that ties back into, you know, I mean, right back to the original, you know, bid or estimate on a project is, what is your contractor including, right? If you don't know what picture framing is, you should Google it, because it's the game changer on how your deck looks when you're done. Yeah. If you don't know what an enclosed riser is versus open, you should find out. If you don't know what a steel stringer looks like as opposed to a nice, you know, capped stringer, again, those are like major impact on price, but also major impact on finish and how it looks, right? So, and also, you know, as we talk about picture framing, there's a bunch of extra back framing that has to go into the construction of the deck to be able to picture frame, because now you have to run basically a border around the whole perimeter of the deck. And, you know, if you're not picture framing, you don't need to back frame the same way you would otherwise. So
you got it.
Yeah, and again, I had a bunch of great photos that would show all of this stuff to you and explain every point very well, and I'm so sorry I can't show them today. But hey, if you have questions, you can reach out to Jon or I later, and we can send you some images and help to educate you and prepare you for your new project, whether you're doing it yourself or hiring someone else. If you don't know all the terminology we're discussing today and you have questions, I recommend you at least reach out to learn a bit about it before you potentially go down the wrong path. And
totally.
You don't have to hire us. we're here to help you avoid the landmines that are out there. Some of those landmines come from lack of knowledge. Some come from picking a bad contractor, and maybe they aren't even bad. Maybe they just don't know yet, right? We all start somewhere, right? And
that's a big one. Like that's where, I don't know about the renovation side of the business on your end, but for us, we're competing against a lot of single contractors, and it doesn't mean that they're better or worse, but you can't specialize when you try to do everything, right? And that's these guys, is they're, you know, maybe they're decent at installing, but then they're trying to quote, and then they're trying to promote themselves, and then they're trying to order product and change schedule and work with clients on design. And yeah, you might save a little bit on the project versus hiring like us, but you've got to manage it for them. And a lot of times they're not going to be able to help you out on some of the tripping points, not because they're ill-intentioned, they just don't know.
Right.
You know, we've got a lot of great guys who work with us, and they're great guys. And sometimes they do their own jobs for friends and family and on the sides. But most of the time, most of our guys who have been with us for, 4, 5, 6 years, they just send the job to us. And they're like, just do the job, man. Like, I don't want to deal with it. You know what you're doing. Like, I want to do the job, and I want you to sell the job.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like you touched on a good point there, is like, it's very rare that one contractor can be good at everything, right? And one carpenter can do everything under the realm of carpentry and understand enough about plumbing, electrical, HVAC. There's a lot to consider out there. And I think that's where if you get into a complex project, you need a general contractor, which is what I do ultimately. And, you know, my direct in-house team is not great at everything, but we're really good at the things that we know. And then we pull in really good sub-trades who are experts in their own field. And that then together, collectively, we now have a great team. And that's how we are able to hit home runs on every job, because I just bring in the guys that are the best at each task, right? And with that comes, it's like an insurance policy. All right, yeah, it costs a bit more, but there's almost no risk. And you're almost guaranteed what you envisioned, as long as you were connected and we were collaborative as far as how we approached it. And that's kind of all comes back to the plan in the beginning. But anyhow, let's see here. I guess, well, if you're just tuning in, this is the Art of Renovation Live. I'm your host, Paul Foster. I got Jon Yuzwenko from the Sustain, the deck company here. Today, we're talking about building your backyard oasis, specifically decks and pergolas. And we're talking about options right now for finishing options, right? As far as whether it's your decking product, how you install it. Maybe we're talking about railings, lighting. So let's talk a bit about that now. And we'll talk about some of those bells and whistles that can really be a game changer as far as the finish of a project, and how it looks, presents, and how it feels to be in it. Yeah,
the finishing touches are basically what you said. It's what kind of railing are you doing? Skirting? Are you not? Lighting is a big one. For some reason, I think a lot of people think of it as like, non-essential, kind of like, if there's room in the budget. And that can be true in certain spaces, but if you've got a multi-level deck, or you've got a deck with a larger staircase to the ground, lighting can not only provide a bit of safety because you can see the depth of the staircase, it also provides a lot of mood lighting or accenting, which just enhances your space at night. Because most of the time, the reality is, when are you going to use the space? It's not likely during the day. I mean, on the weekends, sure, but a lot of times it's going to be in the evening or close to dark. So having that lighting there can really just enhance the space that you've already envisioned. And then the kind of railing is a big one. For some people, it just serves a purpose. I just need a rail to close a space off. But again, if you've got a beautiful view, maybe off your master bedroom, maybe you back onto a golf course or a lake or something like that, or you've just got a really nice, garden or landscape backyard, and you don't want to obstruct that, glass railing can be a really good option to that.
Sure. I mean, I've seen the railings actually be the focal point too, where you get this. There's some beautiful railing products out there you can get into now. Yeah. And again, I had a whole bunch of awesome photos to show you all about lighting options and railing options, which Alyssa from Pesic Marketing, she helps me. She's kind of behind the scenes on the show for me here. They're going to post some pictures in our stories later. Cool. So you can see some of the images we're talking about today and better understand them. But the railing, for sure, it can be as subtle and subdued as you want. And basically, it's there not to, obstruct line of sight. And then you can also have railings that are like just, wow, it adds the finishing touch to the project. And again, I think that it's a touch on lighting too. I mean, if you're building a deck or pergola and you don't have lighting factored into your plan, at the very least, you should have factored in rough-in the wiring to be able to add it later when you realize it was a mistake not to include it. Because it's like the gas line in the heater or barbecue you wanted out on your pergola. If you didn't rough it in when you built it, you've got to deconstruct something to get it there now. And the same will apply for electrical. You don't want to be running overhead power lines to your pergola, right? So make sure that, like, take my word for it. This is like, I say this about people who are doing basement developments. Spend the money on the electric heat trace under your basement floor tile in the bathroom, please. Same thing with your deck or your pergola. Spend the money on the lighting. It's such a game changer. And again, I'll post some pictures later. It's just, it just changes the mood. And it's a safety detail too, right? And now with LED in the marketplace now, there's so many options. Like, we have a pergola in our backyard that we made, and it's, you know, it basically becomes a, not that I dance much, but we party out there a lot. We really party out there a lot. And, you know, a lot of our friends would turn into a dance floor basically. And man, it's, the light sets a mood for sure. And yeah, luckily we built the thing well, so it could take 10 people dancing on it. I'll post those pictures later too. How about that? Don't mind my squinty red eyes in those pictures either.
These photos weren't taken last weekend, were they, Paul?
No, these are these predate COVID.
There you go.
So I probably had more hair in that picture too. Yeah, we got Trifecta Electrical Solutions piping up saying lighting for atmosphere. Absolutely, it sets the mood. It's a safety. Not concern, but it addresses safety. Like, if you have a multi-tiered deck and you don't know where your steps are, and you've had a couple wobbly pops, you might want to know where those things are before you find out the hard way. So we like riser lights almost everywhere, even in like our basements that we do. We like stairwells in general in the houses that we renovate. We try to put riser lights in. It's such a nice detail. You don't want to use them, don't turn them on, but at least they're there when you need them, right? Anyhow, what else we got? We're talking about lighting, railings. It's a 142. If anybody has any questions, fire away. With lack of images to look at and talk about, we're rifling through our content quickly here today. So if anybody has any questions, by all means, you'll get John and my undivided attention, and we'll answer your questions directly. Let's talk a bit about pergola roof options, which I guess I learned from you today. Once I put a roof on my pergola, it's called a pavilion.
Or a covered pergola.
Or a covered pergola.
I'm not into the nitty gritty. Maybe there's lines I'm blurring, but yeah, for roof options, it's funny because, like, typically when we get asked for a pergola, somebody who wants a pergola, inevitably the second part of the sentence is usually, "Hey, I want a pergola. I'm hoping to block out some sun. I want to create some privacy." And
hold on, John. Before we get into, let's reintroduce the show, because I think it's people need to know their options when it comes to their roofing options for a pergola.
Sure.
Because it can be a game changer, or it can be, frustrating if the client picks the wrong product. So if you're just tuning in, this is the Art of Renovation Live. I'm your host, Paul Foster from Contact Renovations. I have Jon Yuzwenko from Sustain, the deck company here. And we're talking about building your backyard oasis, specifically decks and pergolas. And now we're talking about options for your pergola roof. And some of those will let light in, some will not. Some will let the rain in, some won't. Some will help make this kind of a 3-season space. Let's talk about the options out there, John, and then we'll talk a bit about, I guess, challenges, pros and cons that come with them.
Totally. The cheapest option, the one that we get asked for the most and like the least, would just be like a corrugated panel. You can get an opaque, you can get clear, you can get colored. At the end of the day, it serves a purpose. It keeps rain off and creates a dry space. Then we've also got like a fixed roof. So we can do like an actual shingled roof. So whether it's a peaked roof or whether it's a sloped roof, we can put gutters on the ends of that to divert it. You can get fancier than that. You can do a metal roof. You know, I like metal roofs. I think they're beautiful. One of the downsides people always say is like, well, you know, but it's very noisy. I kind of think it's kind of cool if you were out in the rain, because how often do those two line up where you're out in a heavy downpour? Probably not that often. We do them quite often. We try to push metal roofs on most of our pergolas or covered roofs or covered spaces, but it doesn't always work out. A lot of times when we're attaching a covered roof to a house, the client wants to match the shingles, so that's typically the way we go.
Yeah, but I would say that if you really want the protection from the weather, you have to decide, look, like, do you want to give up the view or the sunlight, right? Like in my pergola, I have no roof on it, and in the end, I regret having not built it with any slope to take a roof product. Yeah. But I would still want something clear on mine. I would not get the corrugated. I would probably go with that polycarbonate or whatever, that acrylic panel. You know, they're expensive, but they're stronger. They don't discolor the way that a lot of those corrugated panels will. But you have to know that up front so that you design it the right way. I made that mistake because mine was going to be a deck. And then we were like, oh, let's add a couple posts to hang a hammock on. Like, well, we have 2 posts. Why don't we add a third and we'll put a triangular roof structure on it? Yeah. And it became a pergola. It was like this evolution. And again, this is where I learned things about a good plan up front by making mistakes at home. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so if you decide you want something weatherproof, well, now you're looking at maybe a shingled roof or maybe a metal roof. That's fine. But if you've gone for one of those options, dear Lord, tell me you've got lighting factored into the project, because now you've really changed the feel when you're sitting under that thing, because you're not going to get direct sunlight from above, maybe from the sides if they're open, but you need to make sure that you plan for lighting accordingly. And then, like you said, I like the metal roof. We just did one on a pergola here last fall. I think it looks great, you know, like black roof against the accent of the brown lumber, and did some cool little batten details in there to like create like a web look, and finish it off with some nice patio lighting underneath there hanging down. This looks fantastic. But if you want to be tanning in your pergola, well, then you're losing that chance, right? This particular deck that we built had half the deck was covered by pergola, the other half was uncovered, so there was lots of room for for sun. But I've seen some other options out there too that I'm not familiar with, and they might have been out of the States. I had some pictures of these things that were available, but it was kind of like it was a clear roof product. They had almost like a blind built into it, so you could have, coverage from the sun when you want it. But there's lots of really cool options out there. And then we get into, you want coverage, then how far do you go into, then are you going to make this a screened in room too? Right? And we had some great pictures of yours to show today about that, because you've done some nice ones there. But let's talk about the screen room and considerations then if you're planning to have it mosquito free. Yeah.
I mean, we love doing them. We don't get a ton of them, but we do a couple a year. If you're looking at it or considering it, there's 2 options when it comes to that. You can do like a fixed screen, or you can do a retractable screen. It's big bucks for retractable screens. They're very expensive, but they are a game changer for an outdoor space. We've done ones where the sides come up. We've done fixed doors. We've done a retractable screen roof over top of a deck. They really, really help to create a space that you can use pretty much any time of the year. You can get ones that have a thicker meshing, so it's it offers a bit more kind of like shade and cooling properties. It'll keep the sun off, and you can get more privacy out of them. There's a lot of options.
The one that keeps the kids out. And again, I'll talk about my pergola for a minute too. Is like, we love it, we use the space a ton, but there are definitely times in the summer where we can't use it because the mosquitoes are so bad. We back onto the ravine, and we love where we are, but geez Louise, let me tell you, there's some bugs that come with living on the ravine. And there's times that I wish the pergola was built more like a pavilion, so we could have the ability to enclose it and be able to stay out there. And I've thought about getting a big screen tent to put around the pergola at times, but the way that we've designed it, it's like a rounded deck with a triangular roof structure on it, so really difficult to find a way to to put a screen enclosure on it. So again, it comes down to your design and knowing how you want to use the space, right?
Yeah, totally. Worst case, you just go over to Canadian Tire, you get one of these big orange by orange, 20 by 20 tarps, you just right over top.
Right. There you go.
Yeah. It'll keep the mosquitoes out. It'll
sure.
keep the neighbors away.
Yeah.
You'll be good.
Maybe a blue tarp, camping tarp would be good too.
There you go. A couple holes in it.
There you go. Yeah, I think we've covered a lot here. And I think ultimately, what I've come back to repeatedly throughout here, we talk about the different options and things to consider is knowing what you want up front and understanding how you're going to use it. And I think sometimes, and it's difficult, like if you're a homeowner now, you're thinking, you know what, we'd love a deck or a pergola in our backyard. We're going to spend more time at home. We want to enjoy our yard. If you don't know what kind of budget you need to do it, like you need to do some research, I think, before you even start calling people to get a rough number. Because if you're calling people kind of blind, going, well, we don't really know what our budget is, but we know what we kind of know what we want, I think you're leaving the door open to get into a contract from someone who's not going to give you what you actually want and will be happy with. Or you're going to be in the position where, well, your budget's not grounded in reality when it comes to what you're looking for. And that's something we try to rule out early with our potential clients by asking up front for a budget. What are you thinking? And that's more for us to be able to understand where is their level of education needed with this potential client. What can we help them to understand about why that budget might not be sufficient, or why is your budget way too high for what you're asking for? Where do you get your information from? What can we do to help educate you? And then from there, let's talk about what's a realistic number for you based on what you might want specifically. And like you said earlier, John, like it's super hard to provide a number on a project until you have a very clear scope and specifications document, right? Hopefully with the design that's shown there. Because if you go and say, look, I just want a pergola, how big? I don't know, enough to hold 6 people. Well, are you sitting around a table out there, or are you on a sectional couch? Are you all in hammocks? What's the layout? Because that square footage will change. You want to hold 6 people in hammocks, well, you need a pretty big pergola or a pretty big deck, right? So it's all about knowing what you want, how you want to use it, and then you should do some research about, well, what options do you want?
Yeah.
Do you want it to look really pretty, or is it just basic and the way that you furnish it and decorate it brings the life and character into it, which can cost less,
totally,
right? And
yeah,
like in mine, again, I will show you some pictures here, but we didn't go over the top. I do have some picture framing. We did an enclosed riser. I did some riser lights. We did a privacy screen, but I used pressure treated lumber for all of it. And then I did some painted 1x4s for my privacy screen, which kept the cost down, right? Yep. And then my wife goes berserk and like decorates this thing. Like when you step into this pergola, you feel like you're on the beach, like you're somewhere in South America. Like it's lovely, and it's all about how she decorates it and the colors she pulls in, right? So, and some people want really minimalist and very little amounts of furniture, and you want the deck. Like you've got an inlay in the deck, in the decking. You've got a picture frame. You've got multiple colors going. With these patterned privacy screens or whatever it might be, right? And that's a different way to approach it too. So what my point is do your research first. Look around and see, look, what do you like the look of? Make a little album of those things so you can share that with your contractor, right? Go, look, this is kind of what I'm looking for. I like the look of these things. You might not understand what the material is, but at least then we can say to you, hey, I noticed that in all of your images, there's a really detailed inlay. That's quite an expensive add-on, depending on, what the size of it and all that stuff. But, or we can talk about some of the features. Well, that's definitely an upgrade. Have you factored that into your construction cost? Or we can give you a rough idea, but I don't know yet until it goes through engineering. On my end, I don't know what I need for piles yet, right? Depending what the structure is, of course. So there's a whole bunch of things to consider up front. So I think as a homeowner, do as much research as you can up front. Don't just go, hey, I think I want a pergola. Let's get some quotes. Because you are in for an unpleasant experience. That's what you're doing, because you're going to get such a wide. You're going to have one that's $5,000. You're going to have one that's $50,000, and a range in the middle, and you won't understand why. You think, well, who's the 50,000 guy? What a ripoff. But you won't understand there's like a zillion features in there that are making this thing next level. Well, the $5,000 one, you know, you're going to walk on it, it's going to creak, and you know, and you get within a meter of it, you're going to look at the finishing and go, yikes, right? So,
yeah,
anyway,
absolutely. No, for sure. Spend some time up front, research. If you don't know, get an album, Pinterest, Instagram, like save photos, bring them with you. Budgets are so important, and it's this very touchy conversation for some reason with our clients. We ask it quite often, and the response I get from most people is, well, you know, I don't want to share it with you until I get the quote. Okay, well, I don't want to quote you until I get the budget.
right.
You know, it's like, it's not, I'm not going to, my rates aren't going to increase because you've told me your budget.
Right.
The $30,000 car was $30,000 yesterday, and it's $30,000 today.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to test drive $130,000 cars with you all day long if I know that your budget is 30 grand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
I think that's key. Like, we're the same. We won't provide a rough estimate or anything until we get a budget number. And if clients aren't sure, then we give them a range. Look, is your project, you know, $15,000 or less? Is it 16 to 25? Is it 26 to 50? Is just to give them, like, where's your comfort zone on your investment into your home? And once we know that, we can reverse engineer a project that fits the budget, right? But you're absolutely right. Like, there's no point. And I think that a good contractor is transparent enough that you can see where the money goes. So, you know, somebody tells me, and every now and then this happens. It actually happened to me the other day. Somebody called and they wanted us to build some custom millwork, a built-in nook, and a bunch of other really cool stuff that we custom build. And you know, we asked him, "What's your budget range?" And he's like, "Well, max 25,000, but the quotes we've been getting have been 5,000 to 6,000." And I was just like, "Well, it's a strange range there. Like, if you're getting other quotes in, they're coming in 5 to 6, but your max is 25." And I went through and quickly priced it. I came in, I was about, I think, 18 to 20. And I just told him, like, I think 18 to 20 should be tons based on, they had pretty good accurate drawings for us of reference, and he knew what he wanted. And you know, I guess the key is knowing what you want and making sure that, you know, you've set a budget that's realistic. If you come to me with too much money, I'll tell you have too much money, because I've learned something along the way, which is managing the client experience, right? If the client's not happy at the end, I have a problem. And I've had jobs before where we've done a fantastic job, but the project just grew and evolved over the course of the project. They got it. We call it, like, they got the fever. They got excited. They fell in love with what we were doing, and they started just adding options. And the younger Paul didn't help out future Paul too much at the time, and was like, "Oh, this is great. The project's growing. Fantastic. Let's do it." And we did a fantastic job for them. But at the end, they felt they had a bit of buyer's remorse. They had overcapitalized, and now they regretted having spent so much money. So I learned from that now as I approach clients, like, manage their budget for them, help them to make sure we don't go outside of their budget range. Otherwise, you could be in a position at the end of the project where they're not happy, not because you didn't do a great job, because they got excited and went too far, right? So anyways, there's that.
Yeah.
We got 2 minutes. So I just want to say thanks a lot, John, for coming on the show. You know, if anybody has any questions about decks, pergolas, call Sustain, the deck company. As you can see here, John's a great guy, very honest, does fantastic work. You know, if your project is larger in scope and more complex, and you need landscapers, electricians, plumbers, engineering, maybe we're taking the wall off your house to make this thing work, whatever it might be, and you need a general contractor, that's where a company like mine comes in. Again, we're happy to give advice. You don't have to hire us, but we're here to help educate you and make sure that in the end, you're happy with whatever it is you decide to do with your home, and you avoid some of those tripping hazards along the way. John, usually I would have a little slide that would come up and provide me with your information to share with the others, and now I don't have that available. Yeah. So what I'm going to do later is I'll post that slide in my stories so they can see how to contact you. And maybe what I'll do is, Alyssa, if you're out there, maybe you can help us out with that. And there you go. John, thanks a lot. Been great.
Yeah,
Thanks
absolutely.
for sharing your knowledge with us. And it's been great. Everyone else, we'll be back in 2 weeks with round 2 of creating your backyard oasis. This time it'll be landscaping, hardscaping, all that other good stuff. So it's been Auto Renovation Live. It's been a pleasure. Talk to you soon.
Awesome, buddy. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, John. Bye-bye.
See you, man.